With me this evening, he's back, former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. There he is, Dan Moulton. That's really him. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Political commentator Shakir Chambers worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. Kathleen Monk is the former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk and Associates. And next to her here in studio, Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Nice to see you. Dan, I'll start with you because you're already up there once.
I got the kink out of my neck.
Can you sort of could you outline, if you don't mind, what your sort of perception of the strategy here is? I mean, I remember I'm old enough now to have covered this entire the entirety of the government. There were lots of these types of appearances over the years, a little less so, more podcast focused more recently. What bang, do the people around the Prime Minister hope they get from their buck here?
I mean, I got a similar story to the one that Mike was telling there when I was talking to folks in the Prime Minister's office earlier about this. And it's we shouldn't overthink this, I think, a little too much. The Prime Minister is in New York. The Colbert Show has apparently been asking for him for a very long time. The Prime Minister's team has always been very interested in having him do it. But as you reference, it is also part of a broader strategy that they've been implementing over the last number of months of having the Prime Minister appear on some very popular American podcasts and other media platforms. The fact is, the Prime Minister is pretty popular with American progressives right now. I mean, polling in Canada shows not so much with Canadians, but in America, Democratic progressives think of the Prime Minister as a leader on a lot of issues that they care a lot about. And so I think he'll have an opportunity to talk about things that we're doing here north of the border, things like on childcare, on dental care, and certainly a number of other very progressive policy touchstones that he can talk about there that I think Americans are going to find really interesting. I'd also note that the other guest on the show tonight is RuPaul. I think that's a really convenient alignment for the Prime Minister, quite frankly, having he appeared on Canada's Drag Race not too long ago. So I think he'll have a friend in RuPaul there.
I feel like RuPaul might be the big draw for the audience, but I don't know. You never know.
There's some danger, I was going to say, about the RuPaul thing, because we all know RuPaul's famous line is sachet away. And what happens if RuPaul actually says that to the PM?
I don't think he will.
Move along, PM. I mean, that's the question. Where will he make that announcement? But no, I think it's about part of the strategy like Dan laid out. I think that we saw the podcast kind of push in the spring, but it's about breaking out into different mediums that maybe different demographics will be looking at, clippable moments, things that break through. I always say, my trainer who I go to for political commentary, not for actually working out, but she only sees things about the Prime Minister when it's on shows like this, or when it really breaks through traditional media, like stories like about the divorce and separation from Sophie Gregoire or other things like that. So I think he's trying to kind of get that kind of audience back. And listen, Stephen Colbert is a great interviewer. Like he's done really Jeb Bush, he's done Barack Obama. And frankly, if I was a political staffer still working in the PMO, I would want my leader to be being asked for by people like, whether it's James Corbyn or Stephen Colbert or, Jimmy Kimmel. And I wonder if you ask the question, if, someone like Pierre Poilievre would also be invited onto those shows. Like, who's going to want to karaoke with that guy, carpool karaoke with that guy? Not me.
Well, that's what I find so interesting in our own domestic political kind of sphere, Laura, because I don't think Poilievre and his team care whether they are, but I do think that Justin Trudeau and his team do, which is like each of them thinks they're reaching a different audience, and interestingly, they both want to win the next election.
Yeah, I mean, I think Prime Minister Trudeau has nothing to lose at this point by going on one of these shows, and I think he knows he will face criticism domestically from the opposition party. The Conservatives will make fun of him, quite frankly, for doing this. And I just don't think he really cares anymore. He sort of has nowhere else to go, right? I mean, it's gone pretty low for him here. So why not kind of broaden it out to an audience, as Kathleen talks about, that will probably appreciate him more than maybe if he came on and did Power Play Vassy. Maybe it'll be a bit of an easier ride. And I do think Canadians get a kick out of seeing their public figures on American television or with, kind of, there's a different level of fame, I think, that can be achieved that way. And I think even if you kind of don't like Trudeau or you're not that interested, hearing that he's on this show, I think a lot more people will tune in than they would if he was facing a domestic political audience.
Shakir, what are your thoughts? Laura sort of encapsulated what the criticism from the Conservatives is to a degree, right? They're kind of making fun of him a little bit and sort of saying you're abdicating your responsibilities in Canada by going and appearing on this American talk show. I'm not quoting him specifically, but you can see what the online chatter is like. What is your view about how the Conservatives hope to use this, or what their strategy is?
Yeah, so I obviously think the Liberals are trying to create a larger narrative of contrast, right? Trying to bring back a likability to the Prime Minister, a relatable, engaging kind of figure. And even as they create that contrast, I think the Conservatives are leading into their narrative as well, which is what you said, a guy who, with a lot of issues in Canada, he's in the US, with his late night talk show friends. So we'll see which narrative kind of wins out, but this leads into exactly what the Conservatives want to be, how they want to portray their leader. He's not going on these talk shows. He doesn't care about these things. They want to portray him as a hardworking leader who's here to deal with the issues that Canadians care about. So again, competing narratives, contrasting narratives. To Laura's point, the Prime Minister right now has nowhere else to go, has nothing really to lose by going on this show. But again, it allows an opening for the Conservatives to create that sharper contrast to the Prime Minister as well.
That's sort of what I was hinting at with Laura, Dan, like this idea that particularly this Conservative leader, I don't think he cares if people don't think he's going to be on that show or if he's entirely beloved by those types of audiences. But I do think it matters to some degree to the Prime Minister, particularly at this juncture. And it's interesting, like they're both competing for the same, Canadian vote, but they're taking very different tactics. Ultimately, do you think it matters if you're quote unquote liked?
Well, Laura's right. Canadians find this, I think, quite fun, right? I think when the Prime Minister of Canada is appearing on one of the largest talk shows in the world, certainly in the States, it's a point of pride for a lot of Canadians. It's nice to see the attention in a very rare way on a Canadian political leader. So I do think it matters a little bit domestically in our politics. I'd also just point out this is a popular show, not just in America, but in Canada. I mean, it is shown every night. All the American talk shows are shown every night in this country as well, and a lot of Canadians tune into it. So, this is also an appeal to Canadians in a certain way, and I think we'll see that in the Prime Minister's message tonight.
Laura, do you think that's the case?
I think it is. I think the context of this is interesting, right? If you look at what's happening here, like the government's facing a non-confidence vote in the Commons.
Going to be there for that.
And we sort of know the outcome of this one, right? It's
exactly.
They're probably going to come out unscathed. But would he still be in New York if this was planned quite far in advance? If we're hearing from what we're hearing from the Prime Minister's office is correct, would he still be? What would the framing be different tonight if the outcome of that was unknown, or would he have to cancel his trip? That would obviously be much more serious. But I think it does kind of open up the room for criticism that, this is a pretty historic thing that's happening in Parliament right now, and the Prime Minister's off on talk show. I can see where the opposition will find the room for error there. But again, it's pretty safe for the Liberals this week, and I really just don't think the Prime Minister cares anymore, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like I think, when things have gotten so bad, what does it matter to I think he's embracing.
Well, I feel like things can
it.
always get worse. I would only caution, only because Kathleen, Tom Mulcair actually on radio today reminded me of the Hassan Minhaj appearance on that popular kind of show that really didn't go well at that point for the Prime Minister, and it was actually ended up being quite risky for him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these kind of shows do present risk, and I know you poo-pooed on my RuPaul analogy, but it is out there. The sachet away could happen, and I think that's serious. But no, I think that Stephen Colbert is a tough interview. He's a very smart man. It does play, as Dan say, a lot in Canadian homes. This show, people tune in. I know my kids like watching it too. So it could present risk. But I kind of also just want to say we should kind of relax a little bit around, the Prime Minister was in New York. He's got an evening free. He's doing the show. I mean, for sure, it's our job to make a big deal of these things and say he should be back in the House and he should attend every vote. He's at the UN General Assembly as it is, right? So
it's not a non-event. No one's saying that.
He needs to be there, and it's just it's. I'm curious. I'm going to be tuning in.
Yeah, and to Laura's point, I think the reason that discussion is getting any weight is just because of the current political climate in Ottawa. Shakir, last word to you.
Yeah, I'll just echo Kathleen's point. This does present risk. I don't think it's going to be as hard-hitting as we're pushing it to be, but I do think Stephen Colbert is probably going to crack a lot of jokes at the Prime Minister's expense. Maybe things around blackface, as he mentioned before on one of his shows. How the Prime Minister reacts to those things, right? Does he become awkward? Does he something that's, kind of off-putting? I think will be the story we get out of this interview.